perfect start to your season if you're San Diego State. They came in and handled business. 20-some point favorites, 42-0 final score against the Stony Brook Seawolves. I mean, from the start, they just looked composed. They looked improved from last year. Granted, who they're facing to start the season, they played it exactly how you wanted to. Got a lot of different guys' touches. Denegal looked great behind the pocket. They relied on passing only to a degree they didn't need to. They were able to run the ball effectively all night. Defensively, looked solid. Great start to your season. We'll see how they do once they start facing tougher competition, but great start for this Aztecs team and Sean Lewis going into 2025. Week 2 for UNLV, much more improved. Great way for them to rebound, go on the road, take on a decent Sam Houston team, and just have a effective, decisive victory. 38-21 the final score there. We figured Calandra is their guy, their QB1. They were able to run the ball. The Bearcats challenged for a little bit, but for the most part it was all UNLV throughout. They tightened up some of their inefficiencies from last week. Much more discipline, much more sound football. They came in this game just looking overall way better, and as to be expected, Dan Mullen's team is starting to look a little bit more sound, composed. It's going to get interesting to see where we go from here after some shakeup from the other Mountain West teams in week 1, but I think UNLV is going to find a rhythm and really get going, starting conference play. And next week they got a pretty big matchup at home against a Big Ten team in UCLA, so it should get interesting. I wasn't really expecting this Central Michigan San Jose State score. I figured that San Jose State would start off the season rolling, showing a lot of upside on their offense. I felt like they're going to have their way with Central Michigan a little bit on the offensive line. Well, the Spartans start their first 4 drives, 3 turnovers, a punt. You really can't have those types of mistakes and expect to pull a win off. It was a close matchup to the end, 16-14 score, but those pair of interceptions and fumble really hurt the Spartans to find some sort of consistency. Central Michigan came in and performed excellently. They played their style of football, allowed San Jose State to make the majority of the mistakes, and stood within themselves. This was a team that didn't rely much on the passing game. Instead, they entrusted the guys running the ball. Biggins went over the century mark. Cornist, 99 yards and touchdown. Central Michigan, they just seemed like a team prepared for this week 1 matchup. Meanwhile, San Jose State ran into some roadblocks, and I don't think this is indicative of what we'll see the rest of the season from them, but you come in week 1 slipping up, and other teams going to seize that opportunity. Great game for the Chippewas. They definitely let Walker Eaget throw the ball. He had over 43 attempts, but as you can see, when you're just slinging it up there, you take the risk of some turnovers, and he had 2 interceptions to start the season. Definitely not to discredit this Chippewas defense. They were well within themselves, and that was their strong suit coming into this game and this season, and they definitely showed up. And they may be a team to watch out for, in their respective conference. As for the Spartans, it's back to the drawing board, and they'll see improvement in the weeks to follow. This certainly wasn't, unpredictable. Penn State is going for a national title this season. Nevada looking to rebuild and find some sort of consistency. This was as expected as you can get. 46-11 final score. The Wolfpack were 43-point underdogs. They weren't able to do much in this game, and it's not fair for them to expect to have some sort of momentum against this Nittany Lion team that's just echelons above. Offensively, they start the first 3-4 drives, fumble, interception. Chuba Purdy was not able to run the offense that they were hoping to. As for Penn State, they looked as they were supposed to. Drew Aller had a pretty decent day. They were able to run the ball effectively. There were no slip-ups for sure. We can't judge Nevada off this one game. Let's see how they do in conference play, and bring it back to a level of competitiveness that fits them. We'll still wait to see what they have to offer in the weeks to come. This was just one of those money games you get through, and hopefully none of the Wolfpack's players are too banged up, and look forward to the next week and the weeks to follow. This outcome was about as expected as you can get. Air Force looks like they're back on their winning ways. 49-13 over Bucknell, and they handle it well. In complete control from start to finish. They were able to run Troy Calhoun's offense the way we'd expect them to do last year, and now that they're back on track. We're talking about Josh Johnson, the quarterback, 4 for 7, 112 yards, 2 touchdowns. 4 completions, half of them were touchdowns. The running game was working on all cylinders. They had 10 different guys getting rushes. Cade Harris led them with 66 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dylan Carson had 52 yards, a touchdown. This is expected, but it's great to see the Falcons just start off their season the right way and handle teams that they're clearly better than. From here, we look forward to all the upcoming matchups and see where they stand amongst the Mountain West, how they do in conference play, and how they do against the other military academies. Good start for the Falcons, 49-13 over Bucknell. It's looking like Broncos got a pretty good offense to start the season. Could he have imitated what he did with New Mexico last year? And it's early to tell right now, but so far this Aggie squad looks pretty good. 28-16 is your final score, taking on Utep. From the start, Utah State just looked more efficient than last year's team. Bryson Barnes had a pretty good day. 233 yards passing, a touchdown. He had another 29 yards rushing, another rushing score. They look like a team that can handle teams of their equivalent or teams that are still also trying to figure out what they're about. Home opener, they went up 20-10 at half. They began to stall a little bit in the third and fourth quarter, but still relied on Utep not being able to find a rhythm. Not a bad start for Boise State transfer Malachi Nelson. I think UTEP's just a team that has a lot of work to do, and they may find their way in the Conference USA this season, but still just a lot of mistakes. It's early right now, but so far it looks like Bronco has this offense rolling, and their defense looks solid. Off one game, we'll see what they can do next week, but so far, good way to start the season for Utah State. I wasn't sure that. I was confident that they could win this game. I didn't know how close it'd be, and really, the score isn't indicative of just how in control Utah State was from start to finish. 28-16 is your final score. Good start to the season for the Aggies. We'll see what they do for the remainder of the season. Talk about rebounding for Fresno State. Tough loss at Kansas last week. They come into week one in a matchup that I thought was going to be a lot closer against Georgia Southern. I thought Georgia Southern's a pretty good team. For the first half, it was relatively close and probably in Georgia Southern's favor, but the second half was complete Bulldogs control. They shut down J.C. French and really put on a show. And despite E.J. Warner having a tough time passing the ball, he had a couple of interceptions. They found their strength running, and Bryson Donaldson had quite a day. 167 yards, touchdown. Rashawn Luke came in. He had 3 scores on the ground, 96 yards rushing. This team, who I thought was going to be their strong suit, was passing the ball, showing that they can run against a team like Georgia Southern, who usually that's their game plan. Great win to start the season for Fresno State. This team, we knew this team could be good, but they just showed a completely different way to win. And I'm sure E.J. Warner, they're going to figure out the passing game. And now what you saw what they can do, they can lead on their running backs and rely on their defense. Their defense came on strong in the second half. Early overreactions, but Fresno State, after what the other Mountain West teams did this weekend, they're looking pretty strong, and now it gets really interesting to see how they match up against some of their counterparts in the Mountain West. Time will tell. We're going to find out in the coming weeks, but great rebound for Fresno State. Handled Georgia Southern at home convincingly. Where does Fresno State go from here? We're going to find out pretty soon. The offense is rolling. A game that went completely unexpected for me. I thought Hawaii was going to be able to do a little bit more offensively. I felt like their defense, probably couldn't stop the Wildcats from running their offense effectively, but just manage it a little bit. I think that falls back on the offensive side. Going 3 and out, with some turnovers in between. It's hard for the defense to stop Arizona for long, and they really couldn't. What we saw was Alejado was still injured. He wasn't ready for this game. He's still beat up from last weekend in week 0, but I thought Hawaii was going to be a little bit more explosive, and that comes from starting quarterback being out, just ineffective to play his offense, running the ball, throwing the run. This was outmatched from the start. They go into halftime down 17-6. They get shut out in the second half. It was all Arizona. Good start for the Wildcats. Noah Fafita, led them effectively, and they were able to run the ball down Hawaii's throats all night. The Warriors, definitely need a healthy Micah Aliato. This wasn't a game they were expected to win. We thought it'd be a little bit more competitive, but it is what it is. Hawaii's still a threat in the Mountain West. They're going to regroup and determine the full extent of Aliato's injury. And I see them reeling it back in, getting back to playing competitive ball in the coming weeks. Good win for the Arizona Wildcats, 40-6 to start their season. They looked like a team ready to challenge in the Big 12, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. There's a lot of good performances across the Big 12 this weekend. They're one of them. Got a quality win. I think Hawaii's a good team still. And we'll see where they go from here. Probably an expected result, but going in up until that fourth quarter, Colorado State had the Huskies on their heels. Competitive matchup through the first half and most of the third. It was really up until that slip-up, interception by Fowler Nicolosi that the game shifted out of reach, but competitive matchup from the Rams to start the season. They looked effective running the ball yet again. They were matching, Huskies drive for drive and limited the mistakes. Really entertaining game from offensive friendly type game. High scoring 38-21 was the final score. The Rams really didn't appear to miss a beat from where they were last season. They came into this game fully prepared to take on Washington and tough road matchup. Huskies got 21-22 game win streak at home, and they came in looking to challenge, and they did. Mistakes were limited. The Rams were another one of those teams that they got a loss this weekend, but they looked pretty good doing it, and really there's a lot of upside going into the rest of their season and what they can do. As for the Huskies, they handled it as they should. Week opener, you never know what you're going to get. Tough matchup, blowout loss. They handled it well. They still have some holes to fix, it looks like, but they still have some holes to fill in their game, but not a bad start to start your season with a win. The Rams are another one of those teams where you really don't judge them off this week one Big Ten matchup. You really look forward to it. You really look forward to what they're going to be able to do and progress on in the weeks to come. Final score 38-21, Huskies over the Rams. Yeah, technically it was a loss, but boy, did they look good doing it. New Mexico taking on Michigan in the big house. From the start, it looked like it was going to get ugly. It looked like New Mexico was completely out of their reach, that they were going to have no chance, and this was going to end up being that 35-point spread whooping that everyone's talking about going into this week. But even going down 17-0 in the second quarter, New Mexico stayed within themselves, and they found a way to engineer a great drive. Jack Lane, they found a way to get in the red zone and get some trickery on Michigan at the goal line. DJ McKinney throwing it to Dorian Thomas, the tight end, and impressive play, impressive drive, and from there the momentum grew. The next drive they get a field goal, and now it's a 7-point game within reach again. They take advantage of turnover by the Wolverines. Huge props to Jack Lane, taking some big hits all night long, but staying composed and staying in the pocket and finding a way to get his guys there. They didn't rely on the running game as much, but really got it done through the air, which I was surprised to see. I thought Scott Trey Humphrey was going to be able to do a little bit more, but again, you're facing Michigan at home. Despite a pair of interceptions for Lane going into the fourth quarter, it just felt like the Lobos showed a lot of determination and grit and never let themselves get out of this game. Even when going down 17-0 going into the second quarter, they scored their first drive in under 2 minutes, went 78 yards, 3 and out for the Lobos, and Michigan comes back and goes another 70 plus yards and scores again. You're thinking, wow, I don't think this Lobo team could just help themselves. I don't know what they can do. The Lobos said, forget that. Huge props to Jason Eck keeping his team in there and utilizing whatever they could to challenge this Big Ten powerhouse team. It makes things interesting. Despite the loss, you really look forward to what this Lobo team offers up the rest of the season, because the way they played against the Wolverines, you feel confident that they will be able to challenge in the conference this season. A team that took a loss against a Big Ten team like a few other Mountain West opponents, but just really impressed. Look forward to what Jason Eck and this Lobo teams offers up in the weeks to come. Final score 34-17, Wolverines over the Lobos.